So I'm going to give a little bit of my background, which is my family's background. So my family, my grandfather up in the upper center, he was a sort of a founding father of Chinatown in Bakersfield. He ran a gambling house there, which he had a little black book, which he was able to get by, doing whatever he wanted. And he even knew when the raids were coming, and everybody would be gone by the time the cops got there. So, it's back in the day where they had opium den underneath in the basement, and that's where my dad grew up. But, my dad, he ran a grocery store with my mom, and I have to say that, they're real busy doing the American dream and, let us kids just run wild pretty much, even though we were latchkey kids. We actually survived okay. But posthumously, they got awarded the Civilian Congressional Gold Medal of Honor for their service being a Chinese American in the military. Of course, my mom was in the Coast Guard, and my dad, he flew in a 3-man bomber, the attack bombers, and got shot down after 54 missions and spent time in the Stalag there and was able to get out. And heard his stories that sound just like the movies. So they allowed me to run crazy and have my imagination. Of course, being a single male child of a Chinese family, I guess, my sister's always pissed because, I was sort of put up on a pedestal. But here we have a selfie I took with my Brownie camera in 1964. So by the time I was a teen, I got involved in backpacking, and my folks really didn't know what the hell we were doing, and they actually just dropped us off, and we spent 2 weeks hiking across the Sierra, right? And no cell phones, no GPS, just cooking out of the stupid cans, like the Boy Scouts used to recommend. But we had a great time, and we started like around Longtime, and then we crossed all the way over and came out by the Needles and hitchhiked home. But the important point of this story is was a real epiphany for at least myself. Is when we got done with that trip, it's like, man, we could do more of this kind of stuff. So that was the whole start of a bunch of adventures for us. We got involved. I got involved in climbing, and so. We was reading books like Gaston Ray Buffet's book where they're doing roofs. Well, we went and did a roof, and these people were chasing me down for the Bakersfield, California, because I was skiing around from my bus. I used to drive a bus at the Grapevine, so they caught me there. And, going ice climbing, rock climbing, and anything that I could do that was climbing related, I would do. So I worked for Sunrise Mountaineering in Livermore, California for 18 years. Best job I ever had. But, when the internet stuff came around, poor brick and mortar sort of went. So, in the upper right-hand corner, if you guys ever been to the California Living Museum, right at the mouth of the Kern Canyon, there's sort of like a zoo. It has animals there. When they first opened, they had this aviary with a big net. It was poorly designed. It's not even there anymore, but it would billow up in the wind and rip, and the birds would get out, right? They had all these natural birds in there. So they got me to go up there and zip tie this thing down. So I'm showing up, after work and using my aid gear and sliding around and try not to box yourself in like one of those games on a piece of paper. So I have to mention that I did publish a book, the one in the center. It's about adventures climbing in the Southern Sierra. But previously I published a couple other guidebooks, one of them with my friend, the late Richard Leverty. It was the original guide to the Kern River Canyon. And before that, shortly before that, I have the Kern Slabs guides, if you guys have ever been climbing. So, as you know, the Southern Sierra, the whole Sierras, but the Southern Sierras The Kern River drainage is just immense, and there's just tons of stuff to do. People have been climbing around there for 100 years, and I really don't know all the little nooks and crannies and people doing it because it's very poorly documented. Right? I think Christian Solomon has probably the greatest knowledge after he published the last guidebook. A lot of people from all over the world like coming here to climb. Probably hard to see this map, but Lake Isabella's at the bottom, and it has the drainage goes up to this part right there. But it's sprinkled around with my laser won't work on the screen, so they straight through it. So there's rocks sprinkled all through the area. Now, one of the very first people to ever climb at the Needles was this fella here in the picture. There's the Dan McHale. Does anybody own a McHale backpack? No? Well, he makes backpacks. But back when he was a teenager, he was backpacking on the east side of the Kern River Valley, and he saw the rocks over there, the Needles, and he thought, oh, that'd be sort of fun to go climbing. So his parents were probably as clueless as mine, and they actually had his brother and a friend just dropped them off at the base on the road to Voodoo Dome and said, pick us up at the upper road at the end of the week. So that picture in the upper center is them camping at the base of the Magician Needle in their tubeless and everything. And the bottom center is the Sidewalk Magic, the first-ascent, which was, nailing in tiny little pitons and stuff. And then most of you guys have done Magician would be familiar with the upper right-hand picture, which is sort of the spine of the Magician Needle. And I threw in this other picture in the lower right of Dan that was in one of Rock and Ice, about him walking on coals with his hands. He got into doing that with his feet and then decided that he wanted to do it with his hands, and I don't believe it's ever been repeated. And you would know why. If you talk to Dan, you'll understand. So if you look at the long needle on the left there, that's where the Sidewalk Magic goes up. And like I said, it's a vast area, all kinds of places to go. We got dome lands and earth slabs and needles, all kinds of cracks. There's a lot of new stuff going up still. In fact, Brandon Fowler, who was here recently to do a show for you guys, he just finished the route that was started by one of us old guys on Voodoo Dome a week ago. So another 6 or 7 kids route. I think it's 11 Bs in face. I don't know how run out it is. So, like I said, people from all over came to climb in our area, right, in the area, and then there were us, the local guys. I started climbing at Kern Slab, and I put a caption on it. There's no place like home. Todd Lowell and Chris Iverson, they used to own the East Side Sports in Bishop. They were friends of mine when they used to work at Western Mountaineering in Santa Cruz. But Todd and Richard Leverson and I, we tried to do the second ascent of the Jolly Roger on El Capitan, and we probably would have made it, but we got snowed off, so it was snowing all over the state, and I go, oh, well, we can go. We went to Kern Slabs and played in the sun for a while instead. So I participated in a rock climbing class given by a backpacking store in Bakersfield called High Country. It was owned by a guy named Daryl Easter, who he liked climbing, dabbled in it. He's a real nice guy, and he got Chenard Equipment's very first employee, Frank Bozier, he's in the orange t-shirt up there, to do a class for us. he was Yvon Chouinard's first employee, and actually he ended up starting the store in Paris going for Patagonia back in the day. Well, he showed us the ropes. And, the rest is history there, right? So you can learn a lot from a class, and I see on the social media now there's all kinds of people posting stuff for people to learn, though I notice a lot of stuff is not really correct. So, take that stuff with a grain of salt, and what was important for me is to actually have a mentor. So I have a picture of the guy who mentored me for a little while, Joel Matta, and he showed me a lot of stuff about putting in protection and the whole thing, and we had a good time. I worked nights, and he worked nights at ER. He was an ER doctor, right? So in the daytime, we wouldn't get much sleep. We'd be driving up to the canyon, fancy style, in this 911 Porsche, and putting up routes, and coming back home and barely making it to work, and then doing it again. So when you repeat that process many times through the week, you can get pretty good. But the main thing is if you can get a mentor or somebody who knows, that they know that they're doing the right thing to keep you safe, you latch onto that and treasure it, because there's not a lot of mentorship these days. And on social media, Instagram, there's not your mentor. So what happened was we got tired of going on current slabs, and we ended up exploring all these other rocks. And so we went up to Johnsondale and did some routes up at Parker Bluff and at Dome Rock. You guys climbed at current slabs and Dome Rock?
Dome Rock.
Dome Rock's got some serious stuff. And of course the needles. That sort of looks like this cup. Great place to climb. And of course we have Dome Lands, which is sort of like I say Tuolumne and the Sage. It's endless. It's pretty remote though. It's pretty arid. You got to know where the water is, but there's still a lot of stuff to do out there. Granted, it's pretty good for the most part. Then there's this thing. You guys know what this is, right? It's the Neanderthal Wall. The top of the peak on the upper left is called Cannell Peak, and it overlooks Lake Isabella and Wofford Heights. So I know a lot of people that are local to Kernville and Lake Isabella, and they had no idea that rock wall was there. And they see it every day, right? But we, being an outdoors person and a climber, we're like, what's that? How do you get there? Wow, great to do that. How big is that? I don't know. So there's where it sits by Lake Isabella. If you're familiar with the area, that's in the yellow triangle. So way up on the hill there. So, we were wondering if it had this kind of route on it. It's referring to the prolific Italian mountaineer Emilio Comenici. I wish someday to make a route from the summit, let fall a drop of water, and this is where my route will have gone, right? So we're thinking, wow, we could do something like that, like Emilio Comenici, maybe like the Pizzadillo and stuff like that. Oh, that's what we were thinking. The Comici line, which, if you guys ever remember the Comici pants, remember they had the ads say Comici line? Was to play off Comici line.
I think I've done some lines like that.
Our friend Vitaly, for a climber, finding a direct line from the bottom of the peak to a spiral-like summit is equivalent to winning the lottery. So, mind you, climbing in the southern Sierra is much different than going to like Yosemite. Yosemite's got a lot of stuff readily available. You're almost to the car. In fact, my first time going to Manure Pile Buttress, Doug Robinson was literally belaying off the bumper of his Volkswagen Beetle at the base of the rock, and he had a dedicated tubular sling tied to it just for that. Now you can't drive with it. So here, so in the Southern Sierra, it's a little more remote. Things are guarded a little bit by the height, so you have to do a little bit of work much of the time. Not all the time. You have nice places like Dome Rock and curved slabs pretty close to the car. So, mind you, the kind of stuff that we were doing back then, some people, like Vitaly, these guys still do a lot of that stuff today. It was sort of out there, sort of fringe, making it up as we go. We didn't have social media to look stuff up. I had to read a lot of books. I took a class. So we had no documented stuff, or very little. There are no GPSs, no cell phones. You can't phone and get some help. You have to be ready just to deal with it, right? So, seat of pants adventure. So the tales of the exploits of small number of pioneering climbers who value the inherent uncertainty of the adventure over the repeating of known routes. Of course, the climbers of then were a little bit of a departure than probably climbers today, and we're sort of looked upon as sort of like a fringe and like hippie type, And I always liked that quote by Eric Beck about that. At either end of the social spectrum, lies a leisure class. So today's climbers, most of them, they actually do climbs that are listed in guidebooks versus going out and making their own. And that's okay too. Wrote a couple guidebooks, right? Okay, back to the topic here. So the first person that I knew to try to go up to Neanderthal Wall was Brian Hodges. He was the guy posing in the Dome Rock picture. But he tried to approach from the bottom of the photo up that road by Fay Ranch. And, it didn't work out too well. And so I decided that to run in from the upper part on the Chimney Peak Road and coming that way from the top. Okay, I had added this next section for people who didn't climb, but since all you guys are first in climbing, you're still going to listen to it anyway. So why would anybody want to climb something like this, right? So climbing can bring forth a lot of emotions, sometimes all of them all at once or, in sequence. It can vary from person to person. So for some people, maybe it's familiar for you to think about the cozy feeling you get from some fresh baked bread. Or the anticipation and curiosity before your first kiss, or the excitement of having your first love. Or do you remember the times where you have a problem and you're frustrated trying to solve? Even maybe something that's just terrifying to you that you're the only one that could solve it. That was all for fun. Really, it's like hitting yourself in the head with a hammer because it feels so good when you stop. Okay, so I got these two guys to go up to Neanderthal with me in 1975. Jeff Martin and John McGee. And so we came in from the upper road. the fashionable rubber shape. And there's the first view up close from the Neanderthal wall. It's like 750 feet high, so it doesn't really look like that in the photo. We did go in and we found a place to camp. It was like the only spot that we could actually camp at the base, because the entire base, and I don't know if it's still like that now because of fires, but it was like 8 feet deep in buckbrush with big thorns on it. And we had packs on, and it was comical when I think about it now, but it was totally brutal because you're wading through these bushes, and then you lose your balance, and the heavy pack just pull you over like you're a bug, and then you're thrashing, just trying to get these long thorns out of you and make it all around there. It was horrible. What happened was, it was in the summer, and we ran out of water. I guess we do that a lot. I never learned enough. It's too heavy, but anyway, we decided to leave the gear, right? Just ditch the gear and go! We don't have to carry all that crap. So we headed out west so we could check out the rest of the wall, but then we knew we could just skirt around and get back to the car somehow. But we were just so dry, and remarkably there was like one pine tree, and this is it, it's a photo I took, one pine tree out there, and they had a wet spot down there, and it's sort of like a biblical Moses story. I dug that thing out, and the water came out as deep enough to stick the bottle in there. It was ice cold, right? So we were saved.
Nice.
I could never convince them to come back, so I ended up going back by myself and getting the gear, and driving the gear was John and Jess, right? They didn't care. They're going to leave it there. We don't want to go back. Right? And I went and got it. So I ran into these guys here, Don Evans and Randy Powers, and this is November of 1976. So sort of trying to beat the heat. We went in the autumn. Approached from the backside. This was taken a few years ago at Don's Ranch, which overlooks the Lake Isabella. You can see Randy's pointing out the Neanderthal wall. We've aged a little bit. So we were able to get on the Comici line here. Here's a picture of the first pitch, and it was really super steep. Brandon Bell went and right at the beginning of COVID, he went in there and free climbed it. It's like a 12B or something like that. Otherwise, it's like, it was Randy's lead, and he just sort of got into A climbing, but he wanted to do the first pitch. And I was just blown away, because I've never seen anybody do this then, or before, or after. It was literally to have 2 Chouinard skyhooks, and he was like, you're going, with an H-ray on each foot. And you're like, oh my God, look at this guy. It was like working on steroids. Right? Things look so foreshortened when you're sitting at the base. So here's some more pictures of. It sort of kicks back after the first lead. It's still like 5'9"-ish, right? We had to haul all our stuff because we weren't going through those bushes again. So hopefully the audio on this will be good enough you guys can hear it, because I have these guys telling their own story.
Hi, my name is Don Evans, and was born in Bakersfield, California, lived there for 68 years, and I currently now live at Lake Isabella. I've had property here for the last 24 years, so I'm kind of semi-retired now. I'm an architect, licensed architect for California, and so anyway, I got my start exposed to climbing or rappelling climbing equipment in 1967, actually, where my brother and his friends had some gold line rope, old school climbing gear in my folks' garage in Bakersfield. So around 1967, my brother and his friends were involved with the Speleological Society. They decided to take this 11-year-old out and teach him how to rappel up in the Kern River Canyon. So that was my first real exposure with the rope, climbing gear, some type of a swami belt, and carabiners. So along comes the 70s, high school. I was into cycling very young, always out on a bike when I was a kid. So around 73-ish, 74, senior year of high school, I got kind of burnt out on cycling, and I had friend Brian Hodges and of course Eddie Joe and some other people from West High were talking about this climbing and the class they'd taken from High Country in Bakersfield on Niles. So as far as Neanderthal goes, I mean, I'd been exposed to this whole area as a kid, and that face is always intriguing to me as a kid and a younger teenager. And then when my dad took me on drives up Greenhorn and riding my bike up here, I could not help but stare at that thing and wonder, you know, it's an imposing thing that's obvious up here. And so when I started the climbing with everybody in the 70s, more intensely out of high school, I got rides with Eddie Joe and whoever had a car, Brian Hodges, his brother, and we would just come up here. I was getting a ride anywhere I could to be exposed to climbing, and we'd do these routes up at the slabs up above Johnsondale. But you always look at that wall, Neanderthal named, with intrigue. And there was at least a couple times I hiked to try to get photographs. I was into taking pictures at the time, black and white, to look at the face, to look at the approach, what it would take to get it done. And I know there was a plan to get it done, and then some of the people I'd climbed with, Eddie Joe particularly, were a little more experienced at, I think we could do this, we just got to get there. And I agreed to be basically the grunt. I'm a little taller, I'm like 6'1". I was kind of wiry at the time, and I agreed to haul and try to photograph this excursion over the Thanksgiving break I had from Bakersfield College. So that started this trek of this wall face that's kind of been intriguing a lot of us in the climbing community and others our whole life. I did realize it's called a Point Lovely Rogers or Cannell Peaks above it, but the face itself was basically no man's land to me. And the roughest part, or one of the parts that was really hard, was getting to the base past the brush with all of our gear, our water bottles and the packs, having to climb over boulders down between the brush and crawl on the ground and back over another boulder. And my clothes were just almost shredded just to get to the base of that rock, which was really, you know, what are we doing here? I hope we do okay. And of course, you know, we set out and fixed ropes on the first day, came back down to the base of the rock, had a decent place to kind of camp out at the bottom. And we got back down, we settled in for the night, and I'm thinking, okay, well, we're at least part way up this thing. And I built this nice fire, and I was wondering, man, I wonder if you can see this thing shining on the face of this with our shadows from Isabella, which was kind of stupid, but yet it's one of those things I was intrigued with because nobody knows we're up here. And so the next day we got up early and started up. I did my hauling chores, and it was a big job to just keep all the management of the ropes. And that was another reason I had a lot of extra ropes and a lot of extra carabiners. So this climb took quite a bit of equipment just to get all of our crap up to the top, because we weren't going to start at the bottom and come back around to get it. We had to haul everything we had to the top. And we finally made the summit of this thing, which, you know, it rolled back to a little easier climbing at the very last, say, half a pitch or so. And we were kind of greeted by and both Randy and I agreed that had to be a condor. A huge bird took off in flight as we got to the top of this thing. And that was really a treat. And it was one of those things, you're looking down at all the brush where we came from, it was like, God, it's good to be alive. It was exhilarating, really, to know that we could put these packs back on and kind of hike to our vehicle. And just to be out of the fog of the valley in Bakersfield at that time of year, that was the time we climbed a lot up in this Kern River Valley, is to get out of the fog in Bakersfield where it was sunny, beautiful t-shirt weather, a little bit of snow on the ground in some of these places. That was a good time of year and good time in our lives, where we all got away to get adventure and get back home and survive it and have stories to tell. I had a little spiral bound, little small notebook that I kept of everything, of the people I was with, the gear used, and whatever the route was, the rating that Eddie gave it. And I still have that somewhere, but it was a documentation thing of all the little adventures that you did with these different people. Neanderthal, because of my property here and where I live now, I can look right at it, and there's camping spots on my property here where Randy Powers and Brian Hodges, who I did a lot of climbing with, we have got together a couple of years ago in November, and we actually camped out, and we stayed up till 2 o'clock in the morning, and we were looking at that in the evening. That wall still has the same feeling it did years ago of that is an awesome piece of granite.
All right, I'm Randy Powers from Bakersfield, California. I got involved in rock climbing in 1974. Went on a trip with the Junior Sierra Club to Fossil Falls, north of Ridgecrest on 395, and was able to do some top roping and rappelling, and I liked the sport and continued in it for a number of years. In Bakersfield, I climbed with 3 or 4 climbers doing first ascents in the Southern Sierras and some of the big walls in those areas. Grade 4, grade 5 routes like at the Needles and other escarpments like Dome Rock and Parker Bluff. And eventually got into big wall climbing in Yosemite and climbed 4 big walls on El Capitan, and retired from climbing when I was about 52 years old. When I started with climbing, I had my own business as a house painter. I got into industrial type coatings, became a contractor, then I went to work for a large contractor. And 9 years ago, I became a NACE certified coatings inspector, and I travel around Southern California and sometimes Northern California on water tank projects for potable water. I inspect the removal of the coatings and application of the new coatings. And this is where we are today in this job trailer on site. In 1976, I lost my rock climbing partner who moved out of the Bakersfield area, and I hooked up with some climbers in Bakersfield and continued my climbing experiences. In '76, I was invited to do a climb on a first ascent on Neanderthal Wall with Eddie Joe and Don Evans. Those two had already done worked out the approach work and the logistics, and I got invited on that, and that was just one tremendous experience from the word go. I'd never climbed with either of those two people. They were very organized, and we pulled off the first ascent on Neanderthal Wall, which we named Crow Man. It was some memories that were outstanding to me is I led the first pitch and placed my first rope and my first bolt. And when we topped out on the climb, it was Thanksgiving holiday weekend, and our water on top was frozen. And as we looked up, this tremendous California condor, flew over our top of our heads, and it just captivated an amazing first ascent. Reflecting on our group ascent of Neanderthal Wall, I look back as one of my best climbing experiences. I was a young climber, gaining experience, and I'd never been in these situations in my climbing growth. And I really value that experience, and it's my most memorable first ascent wall experience over the past 20 years that I had climbed. Early on in my rock climbing experience, I wasn't aware of the impact that of the new climbs and the new rock escarpments that were being approached and climbed and documented through handwritten notes, and eventually became part of some guidebooks. Most of them now are out of print or not available. But all this history evolved and was documented over a number of years, and it's astounding how this Kern Canyon area, the Southern Sierras, has become world-renowned for its granite climbing.
So, you know that I was a rookie in 1974, and 1975, 76, started doing a bunch of routes, and 1976 was sort of a landmark year for us doing a lot of routes. You know, we got excited at doing a lot of new stuff. Very few people from the outside were coming in and climbing yet. You know, that didn't happen until sort of the late 70s into the 80s, which spurred a lot of new route activity. So after we did the Neanderthal Wall, Randy and I went and we wanted to do a climb we bivouacked on, and back then the route that's called the Emperor, which is free now, was then called Pea-Soup. It was like the original route on Voodoo Dome done by Dan McHale and his buddy Joe Brown, I think. So we were able to go up there and climb that thing, bivvied on it. Actually, within a couple of weeks of us doing Neanderthal, so we had momentum, right? You can see that thin crack right there. I don't know if the free version goes through there, but that was originally the Merck's, sort of an arching rope crack, and I got these newfangled things called cracking ups. I don't know if you guys have, well, I was using like the number 4s. They were hooked in only into the rope scars, only about maybe an eighth of an inch. Because they were actually jammed. I had several in a row, right? Say, well, I'm not going to drop. I'm going to try to do this clean. Anyway, what happens is that arch ends, and then there's a knife blade seam that goes vertically up at the end of it. So, but there was like one, like an 1/8 inch slot for like a lost arrow piton, big piton. So actually I had to reach And I reached into like a cigarette to place it in there, and I just rocked just a little too much, and the floor just dropped out. And I thought, oh man, here I go. And I'm feeling out those cracking ups, and I actually hit Randy at the belay, and I thought, the thing you think of, you're pulling the anchor on there, right on top of him. We were okay, and then, everything stopped. What held me was one of those cracking ups. And so I'm thinking, oh, and I got to go back up there. So I got to pulling myself back up from that cracking up. Just only by a sliver. And I repeated those moves again. And what was nice about the hitting of that knife blade crack was a lot nicer because it was like the thinnest knife blades, only probably about a quarter of an inch in or less. But they were just solid. That's probably how the shield was when it was new, just solid. So, we all have this vision to go to the big Yosemite Valley and do El Capitan. That was sort of our thing to do. Do a bunch of climbs, do longer climbs, do all kinds of different climbing, cracks, face, chimneys, be a jack of all trades, and so you could do the big show. And for a lot of climbers, and for myself, doing El Cap was like playing in the World Series, right? Every arrow there to show the view from that point of the wall there on the shield. That's my first view out of my hammock in the morning. Everything's sitting so still, the ropes aren't touching the pot. So, in the meantime, we've been doing all kinds of different climbs to get there. That strange little 8 climb on the right, that's actually at Elephant Knob, just a little obscure pimple of granite out in the kern drainage. And this is the east side of Morro Rock on the left, on a rock called Morro Oro, which is like half a big face knob climb and half like a 8 ladder. It's like 1,000 to 1,100 feet. Pretty big. So I'm going to go through some sort of greatest hits here, and just have some more time now without the videos. So on the left is the first picture of a climb called White Punks. White Punks on Dope. How many people have done that route in this room? A few. I know there's some back there, they're not listening. They're drinking beer. So we didn't know. Actually, it's going to be the 50th year of the anniversary of doing the first ascent of White Punks. So I was just talking to a friend of mine and says, I might go up on it this year, just to say, 50 years ago, right? So anyway, Richard Leversey was responsible for actually eyeballing this line, and we were just hanging out, and his parents had this cabin up in Camp Nelson, and it became like a climber's camp pretty much. And he was like the first resident climber for the Needles area, right? Well, he was the same mind as I was, so we got together and did a lot of different stuff. We were just always active trying to figure out some way to go climbing, and he actually he worked at the Ponderosa Lodge so he could go climbing. He worked for the Forest Service, and he worked at the helipad just so he could go climbing. I have a funny story I can't tell here, but he had to watch the lookout at the Needles once, right? and that almost went awry. But, we would do anything just to be there all the time. The middle picture is another one of the east side of Morro Rock on something called Full Metal Jacket. And it's predominantly a 8 climb. I tried to get Scott Codsgrove to come and free the big corner on it, but he never was interested in it. But it's actually good size, but it's double overhanging. It leans to the left and then leans out. so it's incredibly steep. It's probably one of the steepest routes in the park, other than Jalippi. Anyway, that was a fun excursion. Or I shouldn't use that term. That's a fun climb. What's going on? Okay. Oh, I must have touched this with my elbow. Okay, on the right is probably the most, I guess, other than White Punk's famous climb at the Needles. It's called Romantic Warrior. And it goes free at, 5 hard or whatever. Back when we did it, I've always been of mind of just sort of liking the line and climbing it and doing whatever it is to get up the thing, right? I've refined myself over the years and I've done some stuff, to be sort of a purist thing. I just wanted to go have some adventure, so I had this guy that owned the original Bigfoot outdoor shop in Bakersfield. His name was John Tessel. And after High Country closed down, I had somewhere that I had to go to hang out because I was a resident climbing bum, right? So I'd hang out and he says, I want to do a climb that I bivouac on. And of course I'm like, I've got a climb for you. So it was like October 1977, and there's just nobody out doing anything out there, not even hiking or hunting or whatever. So we just parked the car and walked out there one October to the base of this thing, not ever having been to the base because I eyeballed that route from the top of Dome Rock just when the sun was just right. They go, you look like a lightning bolt. Konnichiwa. So I had lost these pictures and I forgot that I'd given them to John and then he lost them. And when I published the book, I probably would have used them, but I used the pictures from the second ascent. So the corner pitch, which is pitch 2 on the left, is probably the greatest 5.7 in the world. It's like 165 feet of just, nice stemming and nice colorful corner. It's called a living corner. The third pitch was a bit crumbly when I first got on it, so I just aid climbed it. On the third ascent, it went free fairly easily. So you do what you do. On pitch 4, which doesn't go free because they did an alternate version in the 50 favorite climbs cover on the right. They bypass the crack on the left and go up the roof. I was going more straight line, so you can see that 8 crack that parallels the roof down towards the right side there. That's what crack John's on in the upper center, which would barely accept vert pitons. It would curl them so badly. I carried one of my keychain because I was so proud of that. It just destroyed it. You just barely hit in there. There was actually one placement that has a leaper lieback in it. You can probably see it there sticking up. It's like totally livering out on that. Right. And then on the lower right, that 8 pitch ends at a ledge. We call it excess reality ledge, like the old commercial about the, absorbing, excess pain for your pain. Right? There's a little ledge. It's only like this big. It's right at the top of the overhang. Great place. Okay. So let me start over in the center there. So that center picture is of me on the first pitch of White Lightning on White Dome, which is in Domeland. So Neanderthal was like one of the biggest walls south of the Needles around there, and White Dome was also in that category. And I'd been in there one time with my mentor, and he was really into chimneys, which at that time I was not. But I went there and we did this first-ascent chimney on one side, but I was the whole time hanging at the blade looking over. I want to do that, right? so I barely survived that first trip because he had launched a boulder about this size down that chimney, and I had to wait to the last second to move my head because it was ricocheting down the wall. But I came back with Richard Leversey and we climbed this. It's a great, I think it's 4 or 5 pitches. It's 510C or D on one of the pitches. This is actually about 10C way back at the dam. It's mostly crack climbs. It's a wonderful climb if you can make it out there. And there's a lot of stuff to do out there. So over on the right is a great view that I got from Rene Ardèche. This is sitting back there. It's Angel Wings, and then on the right, upper right's a Cherubim Dome, a smooth dome. Those are 2 just beautiful walls, and Cherubim Dome is just a great free climbing opportunity for a lot of people, and it's got several routes on it now. We did a route on the sun shadow line that the face climbs up, and we're pretty much gets to the sun shadow line and turns into this crack system. It's just outstanding climb. And I've done a couple new routes on Angel Wings. There's a bunch of stuff up there now. The last thing I did there was called Just a Rock in the Park. We spent 2 bivvies on that. It's as big as anything in Yosemite, except for maybe El Cap. And it's just a great thing. When I was first trying to nose around to find out about it, I asked guys like Herb Lager. Of course, his standard answer was nothing there. It's all crumbly. And he knows that I know that he was lying, but it's okay. I tried. Same thing with Moral Rock. I walk around the whole base. There's nothing there. Get away. Do something else. Friendly competition, right? So, in the upper center we have Bubs Creek Wall. Sort of an odd view. It's like 1,500 feet. It's sort of like a big Washington column or something like that. It's got a bunch of routes on it now. It's actually, if you want to hike the 9 miles out there, it's just right there next to the trail. Just guard your stuff from the bears, right? So it's got a lot of free climbs. This route goes free now. It was originally called Crystal Bonsai, and our route follows a predominant crystal or quartz dike for almost the entire distance. But what was really bizarre about it is every once in a while in the cracks there would be these weird bushes growing in them, but they were stunted to where they were actually flush to the wall. But if you looked at it, it would look like a bonsai tree that was perfectly trimmed. We named it Crystal Bonsai. So the free version, which doesn't take this area where the picture's taken, it's called Samurai Warrior. You ask the name for that. So over on the left, those 2 pictures are of Tehipite Dome. Has anybody ever hiked into Tehipite Valley?
Not yet.
You might not want to in there. So there's a couple ways to go, of course. There's the nice way coming in from the top, and there's the other way coming in from the bottom. Well, it took me a few times to be able to do this well. A lot of climbing's weird sometimes. Sometimes it's the weather. Sometimes it's your partner. Sometimes it's you. Maybe it's not having the right gear. Or maybe you should eat chicken and do it. All right? You just know that you better not go out there. So I knew this line was pretty substantial. It's a mixed climb. It's got hard free climbing and it's got very hard, difficult aid climbing. So, and the thing is it's steep enough that once you're up like above 500 feet, your best to go up and go down because it's too steep to return unless you leave ropes and have some major cheater stick that's 50 feet long. So, there's not anchors to grab all the way down either. So at some point you just have to commit to it. So I don't know if you guys can see the little red line, but that's where the route goes. It sort of goes up next to the Kroger Davis route. The two guys that did the Hart route, first ascent on El Cap, they hiked into the Hippity Dome to do a new route. They didn't know what they were going to do. But I should back up because the reality is they never hiked in the first time to go climbing. They hiked in there to do a pot farm. So then they have their girlfriends with them and everything, and then they have the whole snake trip, the whole ball of wax for going to Hippity Valley. And they saw the wall, and they ended up coming back in a few times carrying loads to do that climb. So their route goes up that big sort of triangular pedestal to the right of the red line at the bottom. It goes up the main wall there, and then it joins the Fred Becky route, which goes up the center. Oops, what's going on? I've got a crazy elbow here. In the foreground, there's a real good example of kind of climbing. We got like this ugly off-width on this pillar, and then it blanks out. We have to drill some holes and maybe a couple bolts to get to that roof that's above there, and then have a 100-foot roof traverse to get to this arete. There's an arete out to the left, and then it follows it's like a shield. The shield with like little tiny wispy cracks right up the arete. I sat down in the valley for a long time with a tiny little binocular picking that out, and I'm very glad that it was there. I brought an 11 by 17 blow up with a slide I took. That was our road map. So when you get out there, you're just like on Mars, right? It's like, where are we at? Well, so, and we were going really slow. We had 200-foot ropes, and we're really on the fringe of sort of crazy because we wanted to save as much weight as possible if we had to use bolts. We'd have titanium bolt hangers, use 5/16 bolts. We had like little rivets just in case we use those. We used I cut all the metal zipper pulls off of everything and put tiny piece 2mm cord on it instead. I still have a baggie of weighs like a half a pound or a pound or something like that of zipper pulls. It's everything. We shared free climbing shoes between the 2 leaders. The 2 of us led, the other guy just helped haul. So save weight whatever way we could, right? It's sort of insanity, right? So in many ways, this was, even though by the time I'd done this route, I'd done several El Cap routes and other big walls. This was sort of my opus of the main event for me. Is like a big World Series because, we ran out of water on this thing, and, it's prepare to die, right? Climb your best, free climb your best, climb your best when you're just totally wiped out. You're thirsty, and when it becomes just heaven to split, your ration of 1 gummy bear each that we have left to keep your mouth a little bit wet. We were sitting on this ledge. There's a big terrace up there we'd made it up to, and again to save weight, we on big walls in Yosemite you bring canned food and stuff because it has water in it. We brought water, but we didn't bring canned food; it was too heavy. So we brought MREs, meals ready to eat, which are way loaded with sodium, makes you thirsty. I mean, they serve their purpose. They make a guy fighting mad. Then he have to eat those when he's in the battlefield, right? Because he's so constipated afterwards. So we brought those, and we had those weird pilot biscuits, and it had some jelly that we had left over, and that was sort of like final last meal. So we was all orchestrated, and without talking to each other, we just licked the jelly off and tossed biscuits off into the void. We couldn't even chew on those things. So, you guys still with me? So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to do a little story read because I still need to promote my book, right? So climbing, for me, it's never been about the numbers. It's about adventure and being with some good folks and good partners, people that they're going to watch your back, right? I've had a few that they're not going to watch your back, and you don't climb with them again, right? You did what? Anyway, so it's important. Those partners are real valuable. So if you like the mentors, you find a good partner like a mentor, grab onto it, try to work it out. People are people though, and sometimes they move on and go do different stuff. I've had multiple different partners though. I have the stories about a friend of mine who's been passed away for a while now. His name's Roland Burkert. He's from Bakersfield, and we had some good times together. So this is the story. It's called Serendipity, and hopefully it gets you this. So mind you, on those partner things, that I do have to admit it, in dry times when I didn't have a partner, that since I was sort of like, sometimes seemed like the only climber in Bakersfield, got to get a little bit heavy-handed in trying to get people to climb with me, so sometimes to be sort of coercive. So I can at least get somebody to go once. Go ahead. No, go ahead. Go. Let me take a drink of water in there. The view of our objective from Cecil Lake was as elusive as the route description in the 50 classic climbs of North America. The southeast face of Fly Minaret is the tallest of over a dozen jagged granite peaks of what is known as the Ritter Range in the Sierra Nevada, California. For minarets, the climbers evoke a feeling of the Alps, albeit a mini-me scale, but with the same risks. Knocking off routes from this book was an obsession for some. Others took a more casual approach from this book, and I sort of took that route too. So even though my personal philosophy of climbing was anything casual, I took a casual liking for some of these routes and did them when the opportunity arose. So climbing in a world full of rocks with no routes on them took my priority over many years, right? Versus doing some of the climbs in the book. So Roland Burkert and I both knew that nothing was certain when you venture into the wilderness, especially when climbing rocks. Perhaps that aspect may be the underlying allure of climbing for some of us. Sometimes there's success, and more times than not, we want to admit, we get shut down. There's never a foregone conclusion. As the climber Warren Harding put it after his first ascent of El Capitan in Yosemite Valley, it was not all clear to me who was the conqueror and who was the conquered. I do recall that El Cap seemed to be in much better condition than I was. Roland and I have been competent climbing partners for many adventures. It was important for partners to have the right temperament, not only for getting along with each other, but more for getting along with each other when shit goes down, and when you're cold, hungry, or tired. In addition, it helps to be adept technically, to have good mountain sense, and have enough resolve not to freak out. Those things can carry more weight than one's climbing ability. Feedback. We depended on each other in ways more complex than to merely hold onto a rope. Who else was there to have your back? Roland was damn near the perfect partner. Roland and I climbed routes over a diverse selection of venues, from the Kern River Canyon to the big walls of Yosemite. I like that when we go climbing, it's hardly ever in the same place, Roland remarked. I can't recall how I met Roland, but I figured it was around 1976, and probably a Bigfoot mountaineering, since I was sort of a resident climbing bum and I was always hanging out there. So Roland's demeanor was always polite, spoke succinctly, and had the skill to extinguish any bad situation, and the guy loved to dance. On more than one occasion, on a route to and from a climbing trip, Roland would insist on stopping at some random roadhouse on a Friday night. Yeah, I said roadhouse, just like in the movie. The neon sign adorned the outside of the rusted building. The inside walls were painted like dark color, and like most dive bars, the place probably looked pretty much like crap in the daylight. Country band was loud and on cue, and the place was packed. We had an unusually large climbing group that night. There were 6 of us. Typically, it'd be the only 2 of us. Yep, there we were at Dawn's Crossroads. Well, Roland was busy on the dance floor with the ladies. The rest of us sat at a makeshift table at the pool table down in Bruce. We had to appear out of place because the clothes were off and the long hair, And Roland, he sported this, and then it was vogue, a curly perm, It was not outrageous at the time, but as a joke, he would always wear this stupid t-shirt emblazoned with, "No, I'm not John Travolta." Now, the band set was over, and the radio's music got piped through the house speakers, and Roland retreated to his seat next to me as we sat and BS'd. And so we're all having a good time, and then this guy comes into the door, ball cap, plaid shirt, jeans, cowboy boots. The guy clearly was not standing on his feet, as he most likely had partied before his survival. As the door closed behind him, he surveyed the venue, looking like the Terminator searching for Sarah Connor. During his scan, he somehow locked on his target. Roland. Trouble headed our way. The guy staggered somewhat directly to our pool table and stood across from Roland. He said, "I don't like the way you look." I was coiled and ready to respond with a long neck bob on the side of his head. I thought about how bad it could get. Then Roland rose from his seat and outstretched his right hand and said, "Hi, my name is Roland, and let me introduce you to all my friends." So he saw the 6 of us, and then he had to change the heart, and then scurrying away. So Roland's play was brilliant. We never expected any of that. But then I said, "Man, we got to get out of here." So on the way, we witnessed him picking a fight with somebody out in the parking lot. So I guess his night went to plan, right? So climbs can turn for better or worse in a moment, just like that too. There's uncertainty. However, who's to say a turn for the worse might be for the better? We were highly accustomed to climbing on most granite. However, climbing of it was unique from what we were used to. The rock was excessively fractured horizontally, making it difficult for route finding. Paired with sketchy route description, we got lost. We had planned for a long one-day ascent and descent, and there was no time for wandering. The days were awfully short in October. However, there was no shame in retreat, especially for a logistical error in planning. With only a single rope, we would have to make twice as many rappels as if we had brought a second line. We left a lot of gear too. That proved to be as tricky as once you double the number of anchors we crowded. devoured the gear. Once back at the base of the rock, we packed the tools to prepare to descend the huge pyramid of snow to the talus and then to the forest to our camp. The sun had turned the surface slushy and slick from firm and crunchy texture, and it was really bad. Roland and I didn't bring our ice axes like we should have. We used these, what they call long pitons they had back then. So we used this like an ice age, like the old school guys, right? So before I knew it, without any tool in hand, Roland said, "This seems okay, I'm going for it." And that he did. So he launched, accelerating like he'd been shot out of a cannon on an icy slope. He was out of control and unable to arrest the fall. I stood at the top, helpless. When Roland reached the talus field at the bottom, he slammed into a Volkswagen-sized boulder, straight on, deflecting like a rag doll. He lay there motionless. I'm like, "Are you okay?" And I hear nothing, right? I got to get down there. And so I had my tool and I stabbed and kicked the steps into the slush there. And then I slipped. And there I go. I tried to rest the best I could, digging the piton in along with my elbows and my toes, and I was just moving too fast. And there's undulations in there. Every time I hit an undulation in the snow, I'll be flying and I'd be like facing out and I'd be facing in, I'd be facing around. It was like crazy. And for some reason, I got it under control at the bottom where I was facing out. I actually skimmed over this small talus to where he was, like on a dirt bike or whatever. I don't know, feeling anything. Just went across, and then I stood up. Right in front of him. I go, "Are you okay?" And he goes, "Oh, I hurt my ankle." It's like, it seemed like an understatement because he looked like one of those plastic army men, just throwing down the hill. Oh, so anyway, we made it back to our camp. He was doing better but bruised. Good thing no broken bones, so I could tell. And we retired to a nice hot, freezy, dry dinner and into our sleeping bags. But then what happened? It started raining, and it was big rain. It started pouring. It was like hours upon hours. It seemed like it was incessant. And it was weird to sort of meadowy country around there, around the lake. And it was just, everything was filling up with water. It's like, man, this is not good. So after midnight, I said, "I think we need to get out of here." So by headlamp, we got all our stuff together and got on the move. And I remember these tiny little things we stepped across getting there. They were like waist deep and like, 8 feet across. It's like, holy crap. I remember having Gore-Tex pants on. I went, and filled up like balloons. But we made it all back to the car. And thank goodness. I later heard that the bridge had washed out on one of the trails there, so there was a big storm that autumn. So back at Roland's truck, we put on some dry clothes, gorged on whatever food we had, and basked in the warmth of the sun inside the truck cab. Oh, that felt so good. Soon we were barreling down 395 towards home, silent and mesmerized by the hum of the engine and the long stretch of road ahead. Intuitively, Roland and I looked at each other in exchange of grins like the cat that ate the canary, but only for a moment. And when we returned our gaze to the road, we broke into historical laughter in the celebration of our survival. Details matter, and our legacy lies in those details. It's important to know our histories to better understand the world around each other. It's important to preserve those legacies before those before us and the things that we achieved or not. And we're making history right now. So go have an adventure and write it down or video it, save it and share it.